All right, guys, it's What's on Tap. What's on Tap is brought to you by Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the NFL. These are Sunday's matchups with the highest point totals right here. And we are going to start with the Dolphins going to Foxborough to take on the Patriots. This one, the over-under is set at 46.5 on Sunday Night Football. Listen, that Patriots defense has looked good, but we saw the Dolphins absolutely go off.
Are you surprised, Jay, that the line is the third highest on the Sunday slate? Given that the game's in Foxborough, and the fact is that the Patriots played pretty good defense in Week 1.
Betting market thinks that the Dolphins are an offensive juggernaut, and I think that is going to be proven out on Sunday, one way or another. But there is a chance that's the best offense in football.
Barry, Raheem Mostert had under 30 rushing yards in both games against the Patriots last season, but he's coming off a top 20 RB finish in Week 1. Is Raheem Mostert a must-start for week number 2?
I'm at running back 23, so I don't know that he is a, quote, must-start, but I do think he could potentially be a dream. Look, he played 72% of the team snaps in Week 1 against the Chargers. Again, and we know no Jeff Wilson. Doesn't seem like Devon Achane is going to have a big role here. So, I mean, you'll see a little bit of Savon Ahmed. But think about Week 17 last year against the Patriots. 17 touches, 91 total yards, and a touchdown for Mostert. He had 23.1 fantasy points in that game. Look, and I do think that if you think about kind of the typical Bill Belichick thing, he always wants to try to take away whatever the team's most important thing is, and that's not going to be Raheem Mostert.
No.
Whether he's successful at taking Tyreek Hill away or not remains to be seen, but that's where they're going to focus. I think if I'm Bill Belichick, I will give up as many 6-7 yard runs to Raheem Mostert as they want, as long as I don't give up a 50-yarder to Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, well, firstly, I mentioned that DeAndre Swift was maybe the most high-variance player in fantasy. The rest of the year, we've got a very high-variance HR situation here with Matthew leaning against the railing. He's about plus 7,500 to fall to his death, which would be a very, very rough way.
You think not even broken leg at plus 300.
This is not old FedEx Field where you fall through. No,
Okay.
This is a sturdy bar.
Yeah.
Listen, because people get drunk at the bar, and you got to have this sturdy. You can't fall over. I'm good.
Okay, no, I like
Don't
the faith
you worry.
in the set. Secondly, to me, the most incredible stat from Week 1 of the NFL season. So an explosive pass play is a passing play that gets you a 15-yard gain or better. The Dolphins had 17 of them against the Chargers, and no other team had more than 8.
Right.
It's insane.
Yeah.
17 explosive pass plays. That's how Tua got to 466 passing yards. So I think there is a very good chance that this team, and Tua looked a lot better. He looked better than he did last season. He had a pretty good year last year. So I think there's a very good chance that this team is just unguardable, and that with Waddle getting healthier and Tyreek looking like, along with Jefferson and Chase, the best receiver in the game, that you just cannot stop these guys.
By the way, just while you're mentioning that, in terms of I don't think people appreciate just how many yards 466 is. I mean, that's I think it's one of the top 10 passing games in NFL history, right?
It's not like the Chargers have a bad defense.
No.
Here they've got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa going up against an offensive line without Armstead.
So 466 is a very high number. But the other thing I just want to mention here, everyone knows about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and, of course, Raheem Mostert. But Durham Smythe, and shout out to Lawrence who brought him up earlier in the week, but Durham Smythe, their tight end, led Miami in routes run last week. He was second in targets with 7. He didn't have a huge game. But again, this might very well be the best offense in football. And here is a tight end that led that team in routes run. He was second on that team in targets. He has no competition. Mike Gesicki is on the other side of the field in this one for New England. Everyone's talking about this as the Mike Gesicki Bowl, obviously. So anyway, Durham Smythe is just, out there free in a ton of leagues. And he might be just a guy, I don't know, but it's worth the starting tight end on the best offense in football probably should be rostered in more leagues.
Yep, I agree there.
Jay, looking at this game, I mean, you can make an argument right now. Mike McDaniel might be the best offensive architect in the AFC. Yep. What does it take for Tua to come out of this game as the MVP frontrunner in the NFL?
Well, I think if Mahomes loses to Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence, which is very much in play as only 3.5-point favorite, and then Tua on Sunday Night Football on NBC, if he lights up the Patriots defense, which the Eagles could not do, then all of a sudden he's probably the MVP favorite. Mike McDaniel is probably Coach of the Year favorite. Really like Mike McDaniel at 14-1 on DraftKings to win Coach of the Year, because he is a guy who will absolutely get the credit. People love Mike McDaniel.
I was going to say, he is a media darling.
Media darling. And also, his coaching is very visible. You can see exactly what he is doing because of how that offense is schemed.
And again, winning turning around Miami and that division,
Yep.
right? You're facing off against Belichick. You're facing off against a very good Jets defense, and of course, Josh Allen and the Bills.
We're the favorites.
Right. If the Dolphins, I'm with you. I like that bet. 14-1. That's a little bit high. Yep. I like that.
Let's look at the New England side of things. Their offense, Barry. Will Kendrick Bourne once again be New England's top wide receiver this week? It feels like they paid Juju Smith-Schuster to be that, but it's not trending that way anymore for New England's offense.
And there's bad vibes coming out of New England around
Would you say
Juju.
bad
a lot
Juju?
of stories.
There are some bad
There we
Juju.
go.
Thank you. I feel like, every once in a
10 out
while.
of
I don't know
10,
why
Jay.
I missed that layup. I don't know why I just dribbled around and then jacked up a three when
Yeah,
it was just
exactly.
right there for me. But
You'll take it to the hole method.
that's what I did, exactly. Like, take the lane, Barry. Some bad Juju coming out of New England around him. We don't know if Devontae Parker's going to play in this one, but I've been saying that I think that even if Parker's active, give me Kendrick Bourne. Look, I'm at wide receiver 39, so it's not like I think he's going to go crazy, but he had 2 red zone targets where he scored on both last week, 11 targets in week 1, a 20% target share. He led all Patriots wide receivers in snaps and routes run. And so I don't think they want Mac Jones throwing it 50 times, but they may not have a choice in this one. They may have to. Again, it's the 3rd highest total in week number 2 on the slate. And, Ramondre Stevenson made my love list this week. But, yeah, Kendrick Bourne, top 40 wide receiver with a little bit of upside if I have to pick a pass-catching wide receiver, I should say.
Yep, and Mac Jones looked pretty good in week
Yeah.
1. I thought he was a toe tap away from potentially bringing them all the way back and beating the Eagles. And I'm a little bit concerned that Kirk Cousins also looked really, really good against the Eagles defense. So maybe the pass defense of the Eagles just isn't that great at the moment.
They've been banged up and they lost
Yep.
a lot of people in the offseason. There's no question about that. You might be right. But one of my big takeaways from week 1 that I did this thing on Twitter, like 10 Tuesday takeaways or something like that. And one of them was the Patriots offense is going to be competent this year.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be great, but it's not going to be the dumpster fire it was last year. Under Bill O'Brien, it is going to be a competent, usable NFL offense.
Yep, agreed.
Moving over to our second game, the Chiefs traveling to play Jacksonville. The over-under in this one, bump it up. This one's at 51 points here, guys. The Chiefs are favored by 3.5 points. Looking at the Kansas City side of things, I think, Barry, the question we'll start with here at the top is still starting Isaiah Pacheco after only 12 touches in week 1. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire come out of nowhere. Very conservative usage of Jerick McKinnon. But Pacheco, maybe not the workhorse we were expecting to see. Where does he come in for you?
He was banged up in the preseason, so they might have been kind of easing him in. Clyde Edwards-Helaire started the game, but then as the game wore on, it was just like, okay, Pacheco's fine. They went to him. He also had the most targets and receptions of any regular season game in week number 1. So the fact that they were actually using him in the passing game, and he's going to get the goal line work there. I'm in on Pacheco this week as a high upside flex. He's my running back 26. Just for comparison, McKinnon's at 44, CEH is at 51. So Pacheco's the Chiefs running back I like the most. The other guys being involved. And by the way, not an easy matchup.
Yep.
Again, it's the Colts, so whatever. But Jacksonville could not run at all. Indianapolis could not run on the Jags last week other than Anthony Richardson. The Chiefs don't have anyone like Anthony Richardson on their team. So I do think Pacheco is viable as a flex, and I think he's the guy going forward. Second half of the year, McKinnon will get involved there, but
Yeah.
I'd be very nervous about McKinnon's usage.
Yeah, it's a little bit messy just because McKinnon and this CH thing, which again is just propping up for seemingly no reason, but it keeps on propping up. But I do think the fact that Pacheco, he is the guy who's going to get the most carries. He's going to get the goal line work, and he's also just Patrick Mahomes' quarterback in a game where the total is 51.
Right, and again, his passing game usage is encouraging.
Yeah, I asked somebody that would know this situation pretty well about the McKinnon lack of usage, and they're like, they just like him for the second half of the season. This is just who they are, how they see it. They know he's a guy that breaks down. They're going to totally bump up his workload in the second half of the season. So, Barry, him not really making your top 40 running backs this week, I totally get it. Let's look over at the Jacksonville side of things here. Jay, obviously massive return for Calvin Ridley, but is that overshadowing how underrated maybe an option like Zay Jones can be in this game?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that we learn a lot out of week 1. Some of the stuff is you have to throw out as an outlier. For instance, Tyjae Spears out snapping Derrick Henry. I'll throw that as an outlier. But the fact that Zay Jones got the work that he did at the expense of Christian Kirk, I think that is probably real with the introduction of Calvin Ridley into that offense. So I think that if you're choosing between those two guys, you want Zay Jones over Christian Kirk this week.
I agree, but I don't have them separated by much. So, I have Zay Jones at wide receiver 30, Christian Kirk at wide receiver 34. Again, for the season, I think it's Ridley and Jones, and then it's a step down before you get to Christian Kirk. That's the order, and I do think there will be a there will be a gap between Jones and Kirk. Obviously, a big gap between Ridley and Jones. But here's the thing. We've talked about this. Christian Kirk last year against Kansas City absolutely crushed them as well. He played 2 games against the Chiefs last year, including the playoff game. 16 for 157, 2 touchdowns on 26 targets. Since the start of last season, no team in the NFL has allowed more receptions to the slot than the Kansas City Chiefs. So I do think this game, with an over-under of 51 and a lot of scoring, I do think this could be a good Christian Kirk game just because of the matchup. As we talked about, Kenny Moore playing the slot corner for the Colts last week. Bad matchup for Christian Kirk.
Yeah, I do think so. They paid Christian Kirk a lot of money.
Yes.
And he's good.
Right.
He's legitimately good. So it just doesn't feel like he's going to be a guy who's, 4 receptions for 38 yards. Like they're going to find a way to get him involved.
I think he's usable this week for sure.
Jay, let me ask you a simple one that this is about the point totals. Do you think this is a game that lives up to the shootout expectations? 51, I believe, is the highest point total for Sunday's slate.
Yeah, I think it does, because I think that Lawrence is clearly the real deal. I don't think the Chiefs can stop him. And then on the other side, think about how everything went wrong for Kansas City against Detroit. Every single thing went wrong. Kelsey wasn't playing. Kadarius Toney has, 4 drops. Sky Moore has drops and isn't really involved. And they still look pretty good on offense, and they really could have won that game by double digits and cleared 30. So I don't think anyone can stop the Chiefs when they're healthy.
I'm just going to say this. I would not have the guts to start Kadarius Toney this week based on week 1. But just watch him have a monster game.
Yeah.
Watch them go back to him like we need this kid to be, and they'll have Kelsey back, so the offense will look different. They'll have to, Jaguars have to focus on Kelsey as well. And so watch Kadarius Toney just have a monster game, because they're going to go to him early and they'll have a package for him. And here's the other thing. So I did a radio show on Thursday, and they had a bunch of people call in and ask me questions. And one of the questions was Rashee Rice or Kadarius Toney on Sunday. And I just I just can't go back to Toney after what I saw on Thursday night, so I'm going to say Rashee Rice. So because of that, I'm sure of it. Kadarius Toney's going to have a monster game.
Are we completely dismissing Sky Moore? Because coming into the season,
not
everyone
great.
had him as the number 1 wide receiver on Kansas City.
It did not look good. No. He wasn't earning targets.
And it's one game.
I know it's one game.
And he was the guy
small
coming
sample
in.
size.
But off a bad rookie year.
Yeah.
One game and then off a bad rookie year.
Yeah. I mean, look, Rashee Rice is somebody that Patrick Mahomes went out and said, hey, draft this guy for me. They worked out in the offseason as well. I know you liked Rashee Rice coming out of college.
Perfect for that offense. He's a guy that makes things happen when the play breaks down. He's an acrobat, can leap. And you saw the rapport with them already kind of working, considering how little Rice was on the field. So it's just a matter of time.
He scored a touchdown on Thursday. So anyway, I would not start Kadarius Toney because it's just, speaking of bad juju, but it wouldn't surprise me if on Monday we're talking about what an awesome game Kadarius Toney had.
Connor, how would you rank Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney rest of the season?
I would take the rest of the season I would take Rice.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think the volatility of Toney,
Yeah.
I might dangerously put him over Sky Moore. I can't believe I'm saying that. I don't know. Maybe that's a fall from grace too far from week 1. The Kadarius Toney experience is just when I thought I was out, he pulls me back in.
Won them the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Targets are earned. Targets are earned, and so far Sky Moore has just not. He's been out on the field a lot, but he's just not earning targets, and that's a concern.
A lot of cardio last week for Sky Moore.
A lot of cardio.
Our last
the
game
anti-Matthew
here.
Berry. I just sit my ass on a stool and earn no targets
you
either.
busted your ass up to this bar, so let's not forget. People forget.
This bar. Listen, this railing here is doing a lot of work. Let me just say that right now.
You keep on shaking.
Yeoman's work for this railing.
Our last game, the Seahawks are traveling to Detroit to take on the Lions. The Lions are favored by 4.5 points as it stands right now. The total here, guys, up to 47.5 points. And I think, Barry, coming out of week 1, where is the concern level on a guy like Tyler Lockett, where our expectations are just so consistently high?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm concerned about Tyler Lockett. I will say this. I'm concerned about this offensive line of the Seahawks.
Yeah.
0 points in the second half of last week's game. I actually think they had 0 first downs, too. Their offense just went into the mud in the second half. They're missing both their tackles, and on the road at Detroit and having to deal with Aiden Hutchinson, man, oh man, I am nervous about the Seahawks here. We were talking before the show. I think it's the line's 4.5. I've seen it move up to -5 for the Seahawks, and so we both like Detroit to cover that.
Yep, especially off an extended break for Detroit too. And the thing is with injuries, particularly to an offensive line, like usually you get one injury on the offensive line, it's okay. You can cover, you can adjust your scheme, everything like that. When you start getting cluster injuries, you just sometimes reach the point where it's just no longer viable. And it's not like the Seahawks were starting from a baseline of having the Eagles' offensive line either.
Right.
That was already a question mark. And now when you got backups on an already questionable offensive line going up against Aiden Hutchinson, who, by the way, looked like an absolute monster against Kansas City. It looks like he's going to make a leap.
Nothing says panic like signing 41-year-old Jason Peters, which is what the Seahawks did this week off the street. You know what I mean? Listen, Jason Peters was a great offensive lineman in his day, but he's 41 years old.
It's pretty wild.
I mean, he's 41.
Pretty unheard of is what I would say.
I'm just saying. I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'm not starting JSN. I think you still got to start Lockett, Metcalf, and Ken Walker, but I don't know that you feel great about any of them. I'm probably not using them in DFS if I can help it as well. I don't love the Seahawks' chances to put up a bunch of points here.
What about this, Barry? Say you lost Aaron Rodgers, or you have no faith in your quarterback. Is Geno viable in this game? It was an ugly week one by Geno's standards.
Yeah, I'm define viable. Like top 15 viable?
Yeah,
sure.
Playable. Startable.
Playable. Sure. But I don't. Again, I'd prefer Jared Goff to Geno Smith in this game. Speaking of another guy that's sort of in the same range as Geno Smith here, I think the Lions have a big game here, and I'll just switching over to Detroit. One guy, look, everyone's already starting Amon-Ra, my ride or die. I think most people will start Jared Goff if you're in a size league where Goff would be startable, and most people are going to start Dave Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs, I said this the other day. Your last chance to buy low on Jahmyr Gibbs is the next 48 hours, less than that. 9 touches. He had just 9 touches. He had under 30% of snaps in week 1 and still had 60 yards from scrimmage and should have had a touchdown, except the turf monster got him. Like, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a big game on Sunday against the Seahawks, who last year, since the start of last year, I should say, Seattle's allowed the 3rd highest yards per reception to running backs. It's their home opener on the turf, which should play well to Gibbs' speed. Big games coming for Jahmyr Gibbs on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of consternation over Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, the 2 big-name running backs to go in the first round. And I think it's just a reminder that NFL coaches are more patient than fantasy managers.
Sure.
And I think back to, bring this up a lot, but last year, Rex Burkhead over Dameon Pierce in week 1. Sometimes guys just get eased in. That's the first thing. So I would expect that those 2 are going to get a lot more work as the season goes on. And then the other thing is that just weird stuff happens in week 1. Think back to the Saints beating the Packers 38-3, but when Rodgers wins MVP and they get the 1 seed and they go on to do that. And with the Seahawks, they're not going to be as bad as they were against the Rams. They're not going to lose 30-13.
The Rams oddly have. Remember last year the Rams gave them a scare at the end of the season too, and the Rams were dead in the water. It's a weird thing with
Matthew
Seattle
Stafford was incredible in that game, so that explains a lot of their struggles on defense. Now I don't really know why they couldn't move the ball more against the Rams. I think they had late in the 4th quarter 3 yards of offense in the second half, but they will be better for the run, and I wouldn't give up. Certainly DK, Kenneth Walker, and Tyler Lockett. You're starting those guys, and Geno I think will be better. These 2 teams played in the game. I think it was 48-45 last year, so there can be offense in this one.
Yeah, I will. But having said that, while we think Seattle will be better and not panicking, I still like the Lions.
I still like the Lions.
I still like the minus, minus 4.5.
That should be 6.
Yeah.
And despite that love for Gibbs, you also still like David Montgomery this week. Montgomery, I see, comes in as a top 20 RB. Montgomery gets the touchdown last week. They're not going to go away from David Montgomery, right?
They want to run the ball. Like, the strength of that team is the offensive line. Right. They want to run the ball. Outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, they don't have a lot in the passing game. I mean, Josh Reynolds had, some moments on last Thursday night, as did Sam Laporta, but ultimately they want to run the ball, which makes sense with these 2 guys. And so I have Montgomery and Gibbs both as top 20 plays this week. Again, Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift often were top 20 plays last year, and I would argue that these 2 guys are better and more exciting than that combination last year.
Yep. And the sneaky thing with the Lions, because as explosive as that offense is and the perception of it, they've got 1 wide receiver at the moment. Right. And also, the quarterback is fine, but he's not a superstar. And so the strength of this team is the offensive line and the weapons that they have in the backfield, I think. So they'll certainly expect that they would lean on that.
Yeah, and we'll see if the usage for rookie tight end Sam Laporta continues to trend in the right direction as well.
Yeah, I mean, he looked really good that first week. Really, nice route participation and targets. So, he's somebody that, like, again, if I'm desperate for a tight end, like we talked about, like, give me a list of tight ends that you would prefer than Dalton Schultz. And it's a long list, but he's on that list. Sam Laporta is for sure.
All right, we're going to take our last break. Enjoy week 2 with Bud Light. Easy to Sunday, easy to enjoy.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotorworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.